Hello, everyone. My name is Quodicia DeBay Johnson. I am the Education and Company Culture Manager for the Dallas Opera. I am joined by some of the amazing creative team for the Pearl Fishers, Dallas Opera's upcoming production, of course. I am excited for this interview. We'll call it an interview, but for this conversation where we get to speak with some of the amazing minds and amazing artists behind this work, behind the efforts of an entire company, an entire community coming together to tell stories, because that's what opera is. I am going to begin with Shauna and all of her amazing things. Shauna, would you introduce yourself?
Certainly. Thank you for having us. We're very excited to have this conversation with you as well. My name is Shauna Lucy. I am one of the stage directors for this production of Pearl Fishers, and I am also the general director of Opera San Jose. Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome to the space. I'm going to hand it over to Jimmy. Can you let us know who you are?
I am Jimmy Smith, and I am the other director for the Pearl Fishers.
Yes, Jimmy.
Yes,
Jimmy. Yeah.
I'm Ebony Adams, and I'm the choreographer for the Pearl Fishers. Hello.
Nice. I love it. So, of course, we get the beautiful opportunity to kind of do a behind the scenes. Y'all just came from rehearsal, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we get to do this beautiful behind the scenes. And so community, we hope you find it meaningful. So my first question for our amazing creative team, what are you most excited about for this particular production, for this performance? What kind of gets you going?
Well, I am very excited for the chorus. Shauna smartly has pointed out that actually the chorus is the fifth character in this production. And the Dallas Opera Chorus sounds amazing. And from the get-go, they've been fully committed and they're so exciting to watch. So that I'm excited to see how that plays out and how the audience responds to their singing, and their music is some of the most, if not the most beautiful music, in my opinion, in the opera. So I'm excited to see that action play out.
Great. I'll hop in and say, yeah, I second that about the choral music, that the chorus is the fifth main character, because Pearl Fishers, the opera, is really about a community. We have main characters, but it for us, our interpretation, it's really about this community that is struggling with dealing with leadership who are having some ethical issues. And what I'm most excited about for this interpretation of Pearl Fishers is Ebony's choreography, because this is my first time getting to collaborate with Ebony, and she was someone who beloved colleagues of mine had spoken so highly of, and of her choreography. And I knew that her interpretation of what community means, what it can be, in the form of choreography and dance, is going to really bring us even to the next level, because I think it will delight and thrill the audiences, but also it adds this gorgeous meaning to the music and to what community can be.
Yes, thank you for that. I am also excited about the dancers. One, just because we have 4 beautiful, amazing dancers, and 3 out of the 4 of them are making their Dallas Opera debut, which I think is exciting as a dancer. But to Shauna and Jimmy's point, I believe that the dancers also are the heartbeat and the pulse of the community. And even though the community is going through struggle, I think the dance really signifies the resilience even through power struggles and what they're going through. So that's really exciting. And I'm so excited to have dance as a part of Pearl Fishers and collaborate with you guys on this. So that's what I'm most excited for. Yeah. I'm excited for it all, obviously, but I do favor the dancers. As
no bias. Yeah. No bias.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So in these works, we know that Pearl Fishers comes with its own challenges with representation, with cultural presence, which with all of these things, not unlike many other operas, right? It is a challenge with beautiful music, but very much a challenge. And we know that each of you have your own personal commitment to telling stories as respectfully as possible. Can you all speak to some of the changes that you're making or some of the ways that you're being mindful of telling opera and telling opera stories in the 21st century?
Yeah, definitely. This is a great point that you bring up because, as interpreters of opera, we have inherited a really problematic rep, right? That's what we've got on hand is this tradition of Western artists creating a situation where there are the other, and through such artistic practices like Orientalism, which Pearl Fishers is a prime example of, telling a story about others. And as a artist trying to speak to my experience as a contemporary citizen living now in the United States as an American, always born and raised in America, what my responsibility is as an interpreter of this rep. And what I can say is that in Pearl Fishers, there are themes that are incredibly important for American audiences today. If we don't try to make it about someone else, right? So, by trying to remove the lens of Orientalism, but rather say, what are the themes of Pearl Fishers? And for me, and I know Jimmy, these are the conversations we've been having, and with Ebony as well. Pearl Fishers is actually about what happens when leaders in office break their vows and use their office for their own personal gain or for their own personal satisfaction, right? I feel as Americans, this is something we struggle with. We have in the recent past. What happens when those that we elect to office, instead of holding themselves to the highest ethical standard, instead say, you know what, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to use my leadership to have personal vengeance or satisfaction or to enrich myself. Those kind of questions of leadership, because we see both Zurga struggle with that as well as Layla. Now, Nadir is not in a position of leadership, but he does break a vow within his friendship. So he has an ethical quandary as well. And Nurabad's role as a spiritual leader is also one that's interesting. If you track his text, it's a lot more complicated than it seems. So what we have are these leaders struggling with their personal desires in conflict with their ethical responsibilities in office. While this community, a community of faith, right? We take them very seriously, the community of Pearl Fishers, that for them, their spiritual and religious connection with nature is, through Layla, through her role as a spiritual leader. That is their connection to nature, their connection to their higher being. What happens to that connection when leaders don't take on the responsibility of being stewards for the community? So when we talk about the material in this serious way, rather than saying, oh, look at this, it's about some other place, it's about Sri Lanka, that is not appropriate. That doesn't have anything to do with me as an American artist. It is not okay to continue that tradition, if you will, to say, well, that's how those people are, and it doesn't have anything to do with us. When I talk about crisis of ethical leadership, I feel like every American should say, ding dong, that sounds like America. It sounds like we have something to talk about. That said, of course, we can't forgive the original sin of Orientalism, right? We have to get in there and grapple with it and ask, do we continue to engage with this material. So the music of Bizet is incredibly beautiful. We have this amazing kind of musical conversation within the piece. What is our responsibility as contemporary artists and as contemporary producers of this rep? I do not have the answer. I in no way try to posit myself as having figured this out. But I am interested in dialoguing and asking amongst our communities, is there something here for us to grapple with, to have a conversation with our audience, to interpret as artists? And if not, then we put the piece aside and we let other things come to the front, or we revisit Pearl Fishers and we say, yeah, there's something here for us as Americans to grapple with. We have a particular challenge on our hands because, of course, like, you know, visual elements tell a story, and how we are working within the visual elements of this particular production has been a great conversation, because it's been time for this production to evolve, to take the material really seriously, to grapple with it. And that's an ongoing artistic process that Dallas Opera has been great for committing to that conversation and working with it with us as we try to find our way with the material. So that is a very lengthy answer to a complicated question that doesn't even begin to answer kind of what the whole conversation has to be, right? So it's my stab at it, knowing that there's much more to discuss.
Thank you for that very much. And thank you for your vulnerability in speaking about the ways that, one, the Orientalism, right? As we look at surface, when we look at how we tell stories, there are different ways to tell stories. This is the way that the story has been told in the past, and Orientalism and the harm of Orientalism, because it is harmful. So, and then in addition to that, the connections that we find from human to human, from story to story, from society to society, and seeing, not just seeing ourselves being here in the United States or centering ourselves, but seeing those very real connections, those very real reflections of, it's time for us to kind of take a look at this work. It's time for us to take a look at the meaning of this work and at some of the messages in the work, and not to shift it into a place of other, while also being entertained by telling stories in a place of other. So I appreciate that very, very much. I have the same complicated question for the rest of my amazing artists and creative minds here. What are some of the challenges you're facing, and what are some of the ways that you're kind of making shifts to meet those challenges?
So for me, this, I had to study this opera. This was new to me. So I was led more by the music and those universal themes that Shauna spoke of. Just speaking of community, that's what was my motivation, was community, love, friendship, the sometimes misuse of power. And as a dancer and as a choreographer, I let the music inform me more than the format that it was before. That's no longer acceptable and appropriate, which was never actually appropriate. For me, music is a universal language, so it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are. When music is playing, anyone from any walk of life will move. So I wasn't connected in a way of, it has to look like this. It's like, what did it feel like when I listened to the music? What does it feel like to move this way while sharing community and while sharing this friendship and this love story and the misplaced power at certain points? So I just let the music move me. I didn't necessarily go by the storyline itself. And so that, for me, and I hope for the audience, that they get to experience that it is universal movement. It's not placed anywhere. You can't say that it's from any place in the world. It's just, we are, how do I say it? Like, we are translating the music notes through our bodies, through movement. Yeah.
Yeah, and following up on the idea about the music driving it, it doesn't, I don't think Bizet did an in-depth study of Sri Lankan music at all. So to me, it feels like 19th century French music that happens, and the story happens to take place in Ceylon. So in thinking about what do we really have to work with, we're working with 19th century French music, a story about power, corruption, love. And when you put all those pieces together, actually, there's a lot that's there that's not problematic. And the other part of the challenge of the production is just de-othering some of the visuals that have come from a production that's over 20 years old. You know, there were spears and cages, which gave the idea, the impression that there was a sort of savageness and otherness to the characters, and that takes away from the ability for the audience to connect and see themselves up on stage. If we say, oh, these are people with spears and cages, they're not like us in America, then our work of connecting the audience with the story is compromised. So stripping that away, trying to simplify some of the looks as much as possible, you know, with budget and time, but keeping things cohesive in a way that feels like we're telling the story in a truthful way and with in the most direct way, so that the audience can really walk away with that connection.
Mhm. Thank you very much for that. And then thank you for mentioning how the interpretation of particular props, particular set design, how the interpretation is impacted by societal norms. Some people can see cages and spears and think something else. When we're combining it with othering that is so common here in the United States, even though we have so many cultures, so many identities represented here in this nation, there is a big part of othering that is very normal, especially in our culture here in the United States, even more so in the culture of opera. So I appreciate you speaking to the nuance in how audiences can interpret and will interpret some of the items, some of the things present, but then the responsibility to make sure that there is a connection, the responsibility to make sure that audiences can actually engage, not by removing what is different, but by removing what we interpret as less than in so many ways. And then of course, Ebony, thank you for sharing in your beautiful way about movement and the ways that it is common in a lot of places and a lot of peoples. So of course, I'm gonna bring this to to an end, but my final question for each of you. This is a challenging piece. It's challenging just in music. It's challenging in the amount of time and everything that we have to work together. It's challenging because it can cause harm and has often caused harm. There are the beautiful things about it. There are the things that we can change. There are the things that we can take forward. I'd like to ask each of you, what do you hope audiences gain from this experience? What do you hope happens when they're watching? What do you hope they leave with? What do you hope they continue to expect when they watch this performance?
That is a great question. And I really appreciate it because, like I said before, for me, the essence of Pearl Fishers for a contemporary American audience, you know, it's a piece that for its history, you know, if you mention to like the regular opera going person, Pearl Fishers, or like the regular opera, like backstage producer type, they're like, oh, Pearl Fishers, what is there? It's just that duet. There's nothing else to it. And I think there's much more there that can speak to our experience, our contemporary American experience, having to do, like I said, with these questions of leadership, because there's an erasure of Layla when people say about Pearl Fishers, oh, it's just about that duet between the men. And I found that fascinating, that that's what the kind of the piece gets reduced to, when truly the center of the piece is a faith leader a female identifying faith leader whose crisis of faith leads her to attempt to sacrifice herself in honor of everyone in the community, to do due diligence, like to say, this was my vow and now I sacrifice myself to protect the whole community. Whereas Zerga, as the civic leader, is unable to make that sacrifice until he recognizes their past history. So these themes are fascinating and complicated and have a lot of meat to them. I don't know how we can continue to prevent the trauma and harm that you so rightly bring up in the production of Pearl Fishers. Can we produce it in the safe way so that those themes are what are grappled with, rather than a continuation of well, that's how those people are, or we look down on the people in Pearl Fishers. So I feel I speak for the team. We have we're really attempting to say, this is a community we take really seriously because they're like us. They are us and we are them. And they have struggles just like we have struggles. Is it possible to engage in this material in a way that the audience walks away and thinks to themselves, what does ethical leadership really look like? What do we demand from ethical leaders? That's my long answer.
Yeah, I think also, I would love for the audience to walk away with, although this in the past has been a problematic opera, that they see our full attempt and intentions of really making it contemporary and inclusive. And so that when they're sitting in the audience, they completely see themselves on stage. And I hope that it continues to inspire conversations, even though it has a history of being problematic. I don't think that we do away with the conversation of like, okay, how do we continue to evolve and make it better? How do we continue to tell these universal themes without appropriating, without making it other, but where we're all included in the conversation? I don't think that we should shut the story down or cut the conversation off. Let's continue to tell those problematic stories and have the conversation of how can we make it better every time it's remounted or done. And I would like for that to happen, because I feel like, especially within the last 2 years, and even in our country, you're either on one side or the other. So how are we supposed to know and understand one another if we're not having those conversations and really dealing with the hard-hitting issues? That's why I actually love this format right now, that we're continuing the conversation to talk about it. And I hope that, other opera companies continue to do that as well. And also just to look around in the room, like in the rehearsal room, it's inclusive and diverse. The production itself, we're at a table of inclusivity and diversity, and to continue to have a conversation. I believe that the opera is bigger. Pearl Fishers is bigger than just what's happening on stage. It is truly a representation of what's happening just in our own circles, in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities. So just leaving with a conversation. That's it. Yeah. Let's talk. Let's talk about the things that bother us and why they do, and how can we make them better. I think that that's how we really get to understand one another. But shutting it out and closing the door on those conversations is not helpful. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I of course agree with everything that my colleagues here have said. Just in the story itself, in addition to the sort of, we haven't even, in addition to the otherness problems of the piece, we haven't really even talked about gender and what happens, Layla's sexuality up for debate,
Yeah.
So I would like the audience to walk away not feeling, I've hoped that we've told the story of Layla in a way that feels that she's not just a victim who's at the whim of some powerful people who
Yeah.
have their own designs on her. And I think that will really do a lot for the piece. And then there's just what Ebony's saying is people come to a show with their own projections about what the performance is, if you're in a good mood, you're in a bad mood, but I want them to connect to what's on stage and find the truth in the story that we're looking to tell, and that they feel that they are up there and this story is part of something that they might have experienced and that they connect on a deep level.
Yeah, that it's about us, not
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
all of us in it together. Yeah.
Thank you, all three of you, for this beautiful, wonderful, amazing time. I know you're busy and you're in the throes of rehearsal, so it means a lot that you took time to kind of explain some of your creative process and to explain your approach to this work and your wishes and desires for the audience. The Dallas Opera, this being part of TDO Connections series, we're actively trying to ensure that we center humanity in these stories, and that's the humanity of everyone, that we tell human-centered stories as respectfully and as authentically as possible. Authentic is not always possible. Respect is a given. It's always, there's no question. There's no reason why you cannot respect somebody. So as we continue these conversations, as we continue to dive deeper into some of the inherited repertoire, but also upcoming repertoire, making sure that as we ask these questions, that they're not being asked at the expense of a community's safety, of a community's humanity, that they're not being asked and we're not exploring these conversations at the expense of this art form and at the expense of the core of storytelling. And I am very glad and very grateful that each of you are partners in this beautiful, amazing, complex, and rewarding work. So with that, I thank each of you very, very much. And to our community, we do hope that you continue to connect with us, continue to communicate with us. Let us know how you're feeling. Let us know the things that you'd like to see. Let us know whether or not you're leaving our opera houses, you're leaving our productions, our programs, our online ventures with these things in mind, right? With the question, with the community, with the love and the things that we'd like for you to have. And with that, thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.